Hello and welcome back to a 001 Radio Games Club. And gang, we got some stuff to talk about. This is the Clair
I
Obscur
am.
Expedition 33 spoiler cast. All the non-spoilers you get, this is our general thoughts, and then we're going to get into spoilers later. So you're safe to listen to the first part of this video while you're still playing the game. When we get into stuff, we'll give ample warning so you can get out.
At which point you will be unsafe.
You will be unsafe for spoilers. Joined by Alex and Brett, and we're gonna get into this.
Wow.
Okay, so Expedition 33, a little pseudo indie thing. I think is appropriate to call it, even though it has a publisher, AA project that we would usually refer to. Popped out of nowhere this year. We'd seen trailers before. People were pretty hyped about it, but I think not quite sure exactly how hyped everyone would get. After the fact,
been more hyped. We should have been more hyped.
We should have been more hyped, and I have to apologize at the start of this video. This is my apology stream because I made these two wait.
You waited until I forgot everything.
To have this discussion because I hadn't finished the game yet and got distracted by Oblivion, which was very good in its own right. But
when I had finally gotten to certain parts in the story and I didn't have you to gush, I'm just like, oh god, I have to talk to Britt about this. Holy shit. Oh my god.
Yeah. Okay, so this is basically going to be the opening bits of this are going to be us talking about gameplay. We'll probably end up talking about things that happen in the prologue just because we kind of have to justify some of the initial segment of the game. But anything that is like actually a full spoiler, we're not going to talk about characters that appear later. We're not going to spoil that stuff for right now, and we're just going to talk about like the structure of the game. And I want to open this by first saying, is this game of the year for you guys so far? We're not at the end of the year yet. There's stuff that could change it. Has this been a game of the year pick for you two?
Absolutely.
Yeah. If it's not solidly at the very top, it's like, it's going to be in the top
for it.
The top 3.
Yeah. I agree. So the reason I bring that up is I had been playing Hades 2, which is how long it took me to get to this, as I beat Hades 2 beforehand. And Hades 2 at that point was sitting pretty solidly high, although Hades 2's ending is not amazing. Expedition 33, which I then went back to, because I had played about 2/3 of Act 1 before, and just had never actually finished Act 1, and put it on hold while I was playing Oblivion. And then when I get back to it and finish the game, it takes me, I think, less than a week to finish because of how enraptured
you spent through the rest of it.
I was. I think in reality, it was probably 3 full days spent going hardcore through the story. And yeah, it's sitting solidly for me at number 1 on Game of the Year discussion so far for me. And I have played a lot of the Game of the Year candidates that people are talking about, like KCD 2, and Hades 2 and whatnot. And I think there's a lot of things that Expedition 33 does that has put it higher for me. But I'm also going to kind of preface our discussion with the fact that all 3 of us are creatives. And I think for this game especially, that does matter in terms of like how highly it's going to sit for people. Not necessarily in like a positive or negative way, but just in a, like, the perception that we're going to have of the story is very different, I think, than someone who isn't.
Yes.
And especially if you work in games or a games adjacent thing, I think there's a lot of stuff here that's going to really speak to you in a way that will elevate it beyond what it probably would normally have been.
Because the story itself has a lot to do with creation and kind of why you might
the process of artistry and like there's a lot of themes about that stuff that are really parallel to a lot of the stories from the developers coming into it, and that the fact that a lot of them this is their first real game project,
which is insane
for most of them. Not all of them. It's important to note a handful of them are very experienced game developers, just not in the indie sphere. They generally worked on AAA projects.
6-year dev cycle, I think. That
kind of, but it got rebooted in the middle of that, and in reality, it was closer to 3 years with the full team.
And
to my understanding.
Something I would like to say too is that one of the big things when the game first came out was like, oh, this small team made this crazy game that like looks it has the realistic AAA art style. It actually looks
Oh
pretty
God.
good. It has all these things, and then you have people being like, oh, but it's actually not such a small team because they have all the contractors that it's still a pretty small team. There aren't like thousands or even hundreds of people that worked on it.
But it's not
Uh,
like the meme that people keep saying. It's like, oh, a team of 33 people. No, no, it
no,
was not
yeah,
a team
there.
of 33 people.
It's a weird in between where actually both sides are rage baiting and wrong.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, I think
definitely
that's a fair way
it's
to put it.
not it's not like it is definitely insanely commendable and really surprising and cool how a compared to like a big what you'd think of as a AAA especially RPG dev team or whatever this is not anywhere near a team of that size was able to
Yeah.
pump out a game that is this high quality and consistent through its very long runtime. Absolutely incredibly impressive, but it also isn't made by three people in a basement.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it's kind of important to talk about the sort of development situation of this game because of how much of a surprise it is, and how big it's been hitting everything. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that is really, really impressive, but I also think there's a fair number of things that people are not necessarily like looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, but there are things that AAA projects would get judged on that are problems in this game that aren't judged because of the team size. At least in a lot of like critical discussions, and we'll probably mention a lot of that stuff. Now, I think the
yeah.
reality of this stuff is it's the reason we're not judging it is because it doesn't matter.
It
Was,
so and
The
it doesn't matter
nittiest of
twofold.
picks.
It doesn't matter twofold. It doesn't matter number one because we're just straight up all three of us biased in this game's
yeah,
favor.
we're very biased.
This is going to be possibly multiple episodes of us just straight up sucking Sandfall's dick the entire time.
Yeah, there's a
Proudly doing
significant
so.
possibility this is multiple episodes.
Full slobber, gargling included.
Yeah. So there's a God. You two.
I'm
All right.
enthusiastic about it. What can I say?
Let's refocus on the actual game itself.
Yeah, what is it besides a JRPG?
I mean, that's what it is. It's functionally a JRPG made by French people.
JRPG.
Who is the studio is very multinational as well. It's not just the French headquarter folks. There's a lot of other folks. I know the writer has a lot of crazy stories about living in various places. But yeah, very multinational team. Essentially, this is a Final Fantasy style JRPG. I think is the best way to sort of describe what you should expect here.
Yeah, but Final Fantasy like the golden age.
Like
as people
Final
might refer
Fantasy
to it
X,
as.
if it was made today, I think is a good way to put
Pretty
this
much,
one.
yeah. Final Fantasy made in such a way that Square Enix doesn't even know how to do anymore because it's been so long. They don't know how.
They gave up on it. They gave up on the turn-based. So yeah, it's a turn-based JRPG combined with. This is a fact that I learned midway through this. Apparently, Ben Starr in an interview said that one of the leads of this game was a Sekiro speedrunner for a while. And so that might be where a little bit of the inspiration comes
really
from.
funny.
Which is so oh god.
It's a turn-based RPG with full dodges and parries built into the combat system, as well as like various other versions of parries. You got to jump and a special counter you get later on.
And as the Sekiro and Lies of P enjoyer podcast, the parries in this game are good.
To the point where they're
really
better
good.
than many games that are built around.
Oh yeah.
They're more satisfying in a lot of ways. But yeah, this is definitely a game that requires a lot of like action inputs in addition to turn-based, although you can turn the difficulty down. I think most of us were playing on either the normal difficulty or the higher mode.
You can also create builds around just doing the dodging, which has a much more forgiving window.
There's also builds made around getting hit.
Yeah,
which is,
there are.
Which is
there's a good.
Let's
deal
jump
of
into the
build variety
gameplay and kind of explain what's going on before we start talking about specific builds. Because the system here is you've got your JRPG characters, you have your mage essentially, you have sword fighter with a pistol. You've got
and the cure to male loneliness, a badass robotic arm.
Yeah, of course. Trick arms are still in. Thank you very much.
Hopefully never won't be.
You can do the Devil May Cry stuff that Nero does with Gustav at the start. It's great. Everyone has a unique sort of like job mechanic, so you don't have a job system like you would in some other RPGs that are in similar veins. What you do have is each character having a special sort of mechanic. So you start out with the like expeditioners of your expedition. You've got Gustav, Mael, and Lune are the characters you're going to see pretty early on, and each of them has a unique mechanic. So Gustav's got this like charge up super move that gets more damage the more you get crits and stuff. Lune's got this weird element mixing ability called stains, where you get stains that you can then consume to do a super move or like buff certain moves, and so you just have a lot of like input and ways to change these things that are really fun. And then Mael, who generally was my favorite character to play over the course of the game, has a stance system. So she's got 3 stances she can be in, and each move will put you into a stance or extend a stance or do something similar. And generally speaking, you can't be in the same stance 2 turns in a row unless a thing specifically says you can. So there's a bunch of gameplay built around like swapping between them. And then other characters have their own mechanics that we'll not talk about yet, but there's a whole bunch of unique stuff that each character has access to that makes them play really differently from each other character. And that's just within the skills. So each character has like a little skill tree with a bunch of stuff in it that will affect what abilities you actually have. So they each have 6 skill slots, kind of akin to like a Persona or Shin Megami Tensei demon. Similar slotting ability there. And then you also have your Pictos, which are functionally your gear. And this is the stuff that's going to give you like HP or crit rate buffs, in addition to a special ability called Illumina. And Luminas are a whole other deal, because every time you level up, you get Lumina points, and you find them around the world. And Lumina points let you make those passive abilities on your gear permanent, regardless of if you have that gear equipped. So you have a loadout, essentially, of Luminas.
So
and if you're a person that enjoys like buildcraft in JRPGs or in other games, because I know the systems designer for this talked about how this system itself was kind of inspired by Path of Exile. And I totally see it. Like, this is way more understandable than Path of Exile at a glance, but it for sure gets to that level of complexity where you have so many things you can stack and do.
There's
to
a lot of
like
synergy.
amp yourself and unlock new builds, and you'll kind of like the way the game structures this generally is as you go through different areas, you'll find different Pictos and Luminas that you have to equip and then play with for a little while to unlock them, and then you can spend your points to add them to anyone. And you
Weapons
get
also.
Yeah, there's weapons too. We'll get to that in a minute. But the way the game kind of geniusly lays this out is that each area is kind of focused on a couple of different options for Luminas and Pictos. So you'll find like a bunch of synergies around dodging very early on, because dodging is an easier thing timing-wise than parrying. So there's things that'll give you your AP, which is your action points, and that's what you spend to do a thing on your turn. You still only get 1 action, generally speaking, but you have to have the AP to use it. So if you've got like this big super move that Gustav does, you need to have the AP to pull it off when you need it, or else you won't be able to do it until the next turn. You would basic attack to get more AP, essentially. So you got a whole bunch of like stacking systems here that make this loop really effective and really interesting. And as you go, you start to get more of the complexity revealed to you in these different systems.
It's worth pointing out too that this sounds like a lot of stuff to balance, and especially just from like you described it in pretty good detail there. I feel like somebody who hasn't played it yet might might worry about feeling overwhelmed, and they really ease you into it.
They
to
do
the point where
an incredible job of easing you in.
It's like halfway, 2/3 of the way through the game, like a moment kind of hit me where I was just like completely amazed at like how much I was actually like doing without really having to think about it, because they train you to pay like the correct amount of attention to all the different systems or whatever, and especially like the diversity that you can get within the builds that you can put on these characters, right? Like everyone has like a role, but there's little sub roles that you can make different characters like healers in interesting ways if they are kind of meant to be just like DPS guys. And
you can make your entire party blow up.
You can make your
that was
entire party blow
a
up.
significant portion of the early game. I ran around having every party member explode to buff a single party member, because there were a bunch of Pictos and Luminas that you get that buff you if you're the only party member standing. And you can build around that and have a thing where there's like an auto death thing that literally just, all it does is when your character enters the battlefield, they die.
So if you're one of those people, you see these guys with videos that are like 17 years old on YouTube or whatever, fighting the Emerald weapon in Final Fantasy VII with 2 out of the 3 party members dead, and like it's just like Yuffie by herself or whatever, and she kills it in one hit. Like you could pretty much, it's the same thing. You could pretty much do the same thing.
Yeah, and you totally don't have to if you don't want to. You can certainly play the game in a much more reasonable way, especially at the lower difficulties.
There's some emerald weapons in this mother.
Definitely.
Especially at the lower difficulties, you're not really required to know these systems as well as we've been kind of going through them. But I think the reason we're spending so much time on this stuff is because it's fun. It's like
fun. It feels so good,
so juicy
to pull off, to see the results of your. And I think like you were talking about it, being somewhat related to Path of Exile's buildcrafting. It is. I feel like it is definitely a lot easier to understand that, and it's less visually intimidating as well. Like you do start to accumulate a pretty big list of them, but I think they have also enough sorting options that it's pretty easy to keep track of as well. What you have.
So I'll say the one gripe I kind of have with this game is the UI, specifically the menu UI, not the combat UI, in that I do think there is so much that you can do, and there probably need to be better ways to like filter this stuff. Like a good example is at one point I was trying to set up a base attack build, so it was like have as many things that can happen on a base attack happen as I possibly can set it up. To find that stuff, I need to look through everything for basically every Lumina where the second word is attack. But there's not like a sorting option for that. Like I can sort them alphabetically, but because I'm looking for the second word, which is the attack part, to know what affects base attacks, that doesn't really help. You can sort it by offense and defense, but by the point that starts to become necessary, you're already in the territory of having so many.
Well, don't forget, Ryan,
not super easy.
Don't forget, it's like, I have to sort through all this gate. Like okay, the Lumina is like, there's a lot. By a lot, we mean like there might actually be hundreds. I don't actually.
I think there are at least over 100.
There are so many. Like the whole entire screen is full of them. By the
I did not count them.
Speaking of the Lumina and the one like sort of thing that one of the things that I ran into, and not really like this wasn't really affecting. I say it wasn't really affecting it wasn't, proving to be a major roadblock in my way. I found out, I'm pretty sure either right before or right after I got through Act 1, I was like, oh, that's what the Lumina like little pieces I've been collecting for. I can use those to increase my character's inventory and actually put more passive skills in. Which we also like unlocking the skills to be able to be passive. You fight with them on a character.
Yeah, you have to mount them for a while.
It's as also specifically stated by the developers, it's the Final Fantasy IX and the Lost Odyssey system of equipping gear until you learn all the abilities from it, and then you can switch to something else and learn all the abilities off of that, and then you have those abilities forever. Which is the best system. Oh my gosh, I'm glad they did it because it's so good.
You're teaching yourself how like these things work, getting experience on how you could work in build crafting things, how you can add them to your build. It's good. It's good. God damn it!
It really hits the juicy part of your brain in a good way. So that's the kind of combat loop. There's other layers of stuff here. The weapons are a big one, so every character has a ton of weapons. there's tons of weapons. There is stat selection, like Alex just mentioned. General weapons are going to be basically build defining. So a weapon is going to have a thing that it does, and that'll be like, oh, when I hit a base attack, it'll burn the enemy. And that will typically like play into some of the builds that you can do with your Luminas.
And what's this? A double burn Picto?
Double burn, very useful. There's others that are more defensive. So one of the ones I used pretty frequently was when my sort of duelist would switch out of a stance, it would apply a protection buff to my entire party. And it would heal them a little bit. So it kind of lets one of your offensive characters do a little bit of defensive stuff when you're moving in and out of stances. And that can be pretty useful. And it's just little things like that a lot of the time. But your weapon also determines your stat scaling. And they scale with stats a la the Souls series, as well as many other games, but I think the Souls series is the one people are going to be most familiar with in what this means. Where, like, if you have an A scaling in Dex, you want to be putting points into Dex. Here it would be Agility. So there's very much that system, but these stats will also give you a thing on their own. So if you're buffing Vitality, you get more health. If you're buffing Defense, you get more defense. They also kind of have secondary effects, where if you buff defense enough, it'll also buff your crit chance. Not as much as if you were adjusting the luck stat, which is purely crit chance, but you kind of end up with a pretty even spread of doing things, of buffing things in that way as you're moving through, because stats tend to affect multiple things. And there's a lot of breakpoints to make things much better. So
also, they give you so many of the item to respec character points that it is it's so easy to just play around and
I'm not sure if they're infinite at any point. I didn't check, but I did notice some enemies dropped them, so I'm gonna assume they're farmable in the end game.
Probably.
Even then, I wound up with like 35 of them by that point, and I used maybe one of them to respec to better use a weapon that I'd found. So you have plenty of respec stuff. Certainly be willing to use it, because you get quite a few. That's the majority of the gameplay systems. But we haven't talked about the enemies yet, which is, I think, the other half of the combat system that's very important. So your enemies, the Nevrons, which are these, generally speaking, these like creatures that exist in the main continent, they are like a huge variety of crazy surrealist monstrosities that'll attack you, and they're super cool. This is, I think, a good opportunity to also talk about the art style of the game, which is drop dead gorgeous.
It's insane.
It's timeless. I'm calling it now. This game is going to
for sure.
Is going to age like wine.
It's hard for a game with a realistic art style to be that, because usually they're chasing the graphical fidelity, which within 5 to 10 years is already being surpassed by things in the same console generation that just come out at a later time. But it has so much unique stuff going on. This is basically the way I've always thought of it is it's the Forspoken art style, but what if it looked good?
Because you have more than one
pretty good way of describing it.
Yeah,
because it's like dark black and brown base colors with like shiny gold highlights,
lots of particle effects.
Absolutely big on
glowing
the
elemental energy, flowing hair for characters like floating around and stuff, and weird like wiggly visual effects and stuff. Like
lots
all
of
things
physicsy
that
capes and whatnot.
Yes. things that would bring the PS4 to its knees. But, they feel more directed, and like they have an actual meaning. We mentioned the actual meaning that artistic creation and all that stuff has in the story, and they actually like do that in the visuals, which it would be a shame if they didn't, because that's the easiest place to have that stuff appear. But like so many enemies are like sculptures, or have like masks on them, or are like twisted versions of pieces of art, or like plants or something, and that goes for the environment as well.
Plants, pottery, coral.
Yes, and all of it is very, very collaged together in a very interesting sort of way that you don't really, if they had tried to be too grounded with it, it wouldn't have worked as well. But they really like they just go so above and beyond to make everything very surreal. And they take all these realistic assets and textures and just like light them in like really interesting ways. They go the Ghost of Tsushima route of really going crazy with the lighting and the bright colors, especially red. Whenever there's like a bunch of red on the screen, like red
Yes.
flowers,
Oh, it
leaves, or whatever,
pops.
yeah, they got the saturation down. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. The style here is stylistically just gorgeous. I think the kind of closest comparison I can make, and this is going to be maybe a little weird, but Ghost of Tsushima and Ghost of Yotei, I think, have a similar kind of feel to them in that the games themselves are not the highest fidelity thing you've ever seen. Like, they're not going for ultra realism in terms of like you can see every single detail of every single texture on everything. It's more that they're going for a really unified artistic vision in a very still high fidelity setting and world and like character design. But if you look at it compared to like Last of Us Part 2, you're gonna see definitely that like there is a difference in terms of what the actual character models look like and the environment stuff looks like, but it doesn't matter because it looks so good the way that they've done it.
It makes you feel that it's real.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's immersive enough with how detailed it is,
Absolutely, and it's not going for true realism, which I think is to its benefit in the same manner as Ghost of Tsushima, where it is going for a little bit of that like hyper real look, where it's just a bit more like fantastical than reality is.
Wow, the dirt is smeared on his face so beautifully.
And also everyone is covered in dirt. Everyone's covered in dirt and blood.
Everyone's covered in dirt and blood, especially when I'm done with a combat.
You are not making it out of there without there, just caked on. That's how you can tell this game is really French.
Too. It's so funny. Just seeing someone covered head to toe in blood.
Just having a nice conversation, especially when it's a cutscene that isn't dramatic.
Yeah, it just happens to take place right after like the boss fight that like like a character realizes something about themselves that makes them feel more positively for a little bit, and everyone's trying to be like triumphant, but they're all just slathered, caked in blood. Covered.
Also, wonderful, awesome. God, wonderful. Like while we're still like on a smidge of gameplay, but I mean we're still being that's it. But when your party members die, like when your first team dies, everyone's back at 1 as soon as you're done with the combat.
Yeah, you don't need to use like revive items. There's a lot of quality of life here. That was a really nice
accessibility.
One of the things I really like too is that we've seen a lot of JRPGs go the route of your health and resources are now per fight, or especially like health is per fight and mana is not. So you have to like measure mana, and then your health is going to take care of itself if you don't get killed. Expedition 33 is like very much there isn't really a mana system at all. You have your AP system, but that's what controls everything. So it's if you have the points to do a thing, you can do it, and that's always the case. And you always start at the same number unless you change that with Illumina.
There's also
HP
free aim.
We'll get to that in a second. The HP is not it carries over between fights, so there is a usage to healing, and you have your equivalent of a like essentially Estus flask in this case, where it's a
pretty much
reusable healing potion that will reset when you get a checkpoint, and you've got charges of that, and you can upgrade it. Same way with your healing items, as you have items that do things. These are all, instead of being items that are single use, you have a set limit of them until you get to the next checkpoint. So it'll be like your revives that you can use, you'll have like 6 of those until you reach the next checkpoint or something like that.
Here's
so you have to kind of ration those things.
Wasn't really able to keep track of is, are those revive and healing items spent if you fail the fight? Do they get replenished? Like
I believe they
that
do.
would do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
wasn't entirely sure if it did that or if it refilled them from like the stock you had accumulated.
Yeah, there are certain things that don't reset if you fail, but that I believe you do get them all back. I could be wrong about that, but I definitely failed a few fights having used a lot of them, so I think it probably does get reset. And then like Alex mentioned, there's free aiming that's like essentially the Persona gun. that you pull out in Persona 5.
Because there are weak spots on enemies, and they also feel good to shoot.
Yeah, so there is like that mechanic.
You get to move it with the stick, like you're actually
like you're actually aiming.
It's very cool.
And there's status effects that can impact that. You can
get the dizzy effect that makes it harder to aim. And you can, of course, build into your free aim shots, and those free aim shots take one of your AP, but they don't take your turn, so you can mix and match them with your other stuff. There's things like if you do a free aim before you do an attack or before you do a skill, it'll buff the damage of the next thing you do. So there's lots of like, the system keeps looping back in on itself, and that's the, I think, really impressive part of the combat system, and how well built it is. And I think another huge benefit, both to the combat system but to the rest of the game as well, is the pacing. Expedition 33 does not waste your time. Basically ever, yeah. The only things, you get some stuff that can waste your time at the end if you're like, oh, I want to go kill every optional super boss and do a bunch of challenges where I have to
you're wasting
learn
your own
games.
time there at that point.
But like, that's your choice. If you want to do that, if you want to do that, you can. And I did.
Look, getting a character's
getting
a character's Speedo skin is not a waste of time.
Yeah, that's the reward. You get their swimsuit outfits. By doing a bunch of shenanigans throughout the game. So tons of stuff to look forward to by doing that, and tons of optional content. But the actual main story path, I think on average people are going to finish this between like 30 and 45 hours, I think would be the general like regular gamer playthrough. You can definitely extend that. Like that is
Absolutely.
Not anywhere near the high end of what it can be, because there's so much optional stuff. But the way the story is structured and the way the game is structured, you're never going to be locked out of doing things in that open world or overworld that you get access to. So as a person going through it, there is no penalty for you going like, I'm going to go rush through the story and do all the stuff while it's still challenging. Because one of the things that Brett had told me while I was playing is like, hey, you're going to get access to a ton of stuff. I'd actually recommend you don't do it, and instead just do the story so that you're not ludicrously overpowered, which is what I did. So I did like enough things to get the story filled out, but then I was able to do like the final boss and stuff without one-shotting them, right? Like,
so
I was a wee bit overpowered. I think I was like level 75 to 80.
You were for sure overpowered.
You were for sure overpowered.
Absolutely overpowered.
I was for sure overpowered. I'm also not that good at the game, despite how I love parrying and dodging. Also, do not have some of the absolutely cracked out of your gourd builds that you can make. I've seen two completely different.
I know there is a build in which Mile can one-shot everything. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. I just know there is a build in which Mile one-shots everything. So
while I find that neat, that's definitely not like my play. I don't find that style of play like entertaining.
Yeah, I think you also.
I'm not that heavy of a build crafter.
The point in which you unlock all of that stuff is at the end game, regardless. So like, you're not going to be doing that to every boss of the story as you go through, but you will hit a point where you can certainly overpower yourself quite a bit. Before that point, you're not going to be that overpowered, but you can certainly, like, if you grind, you can grind to reduce the difficulty. Like all the classic JRPG things you can do here. But there's a lot of stuff in the story that is more satisfying, I think, if it turns into an actual fight. And there's a small handful of fights where if you finish them too quickly, you miss dialogue. Very small number of them, but there are a couple that have like dialogue that will happen in between rounds of the fight, or like as a special attack happens or something. And if you skip that attack or skip a thing, you can miss it. Nothing typically that important. But yeah, that is a thing to keep an eye out on, is if you want to make sure you get everything possible, it's probably better to actually finish the story before you go crazy on side content, except for the side content that the story calls out. I would say there is definitely like points in the game where the story will like hint you to go do a thing, and at that point you probably should. And you also have like some simple relationship mechanics, things like a very, very simplified version of what's in Persona or Shin Megami Tensei or Metaphor, etc. All the Atlas games have vagaries of this type of system.
I kind of liked how simple it was, to be honest.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't obviously, I do not hate, the Persona games. The fucking 3 is one of my favorites ever, but, it could be a little stressful trying to manage everybody's relationship
Yeah.
stuff, and they just kind of, because, there isn't a whole, you don't have to worry about like 28 people or whatever interacting with you all the time, because there's only your
Yeah.
small party that doesn't really grow that much over the course of the whole game relative to something like a Persona game. They kind of, they went in the right direction by keeping things simpler with the relationship stuff. You can talk to everybody in, the camp that they kind of
Your Baldur's
divide
Gate
story
camp.
segments by. Yeah. They don't just like force you to only talk to one person and then you miss the chance to talk to everybody
Yeah.
else. And because of
Yeah.
that, you can get pretty awesome and sometimes necessary abilities from characters by talking to them. And you can get all of them instead of having to only
Yes.
do one or two, which
There
feels
is a
nice for
point in
this
the
game.
game in which you'll unlock basically like a, not necessarily ultimate attack, but a character's like a second set of very limited skills that don't take a
That don't
turn.
count as
Yeah.
your turn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't take a turn, but they do some pretty powerful stuff. And they would need an extra resource that you get. Those you unlock extras of those by doing relationship stuffs. There's a super minor, and I do want to clarify that this is very small scale to not like set expectations and where they shouldn't be. Very minor loyalty missions for some of your party members, not all of them. Where you have like a really simple, okay, we need to go to this area that we've unlocked and we can do a thing, and that'll tell you more about my character as well as unlocking a thing.
Mhm.
Those are handy to do, and they're also optional, so you don't have to if you don't want to.
And
Though
they're also good.
I would definitely recommend doing them because they're
Oh
really
yeah,
good.
absolutely.
But like they're not quite to the complexity of something like a Mass Effect loyalty mission. They're much more small side missions that will get you some extra info. With one exception that is far more dramatic. I do
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
yeah, in general, there's a lot of really cool side stuff here. They did a great job of pacing the game so that you don't feel like you're missing out on things as you go through it. And if you do for some reason, you can always go back and get that stuff again, generally.
Looking at
I,
you, Sproing.
yeah, looking at Sprong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Good old Sprong. They also do the thing I love from Xenoblade, which is when you get the overworld, and this game does have a full JRPG style overworld, which I love.
Yeah.
I know Final Fantasy started to move away from these, although notably Rebirth has one as well. I don't want to throw shade at Final Fantasy when Rebirth does
Oh,
have
nice.
one. Kind of. It's a little bit differently formatted, but it does have an overworld.
I like that there's no mystery encounters too. You can see all the enemies.
Yeah,
so
you
you're
can see
not
all the
Yeah,
enemies.
yeah.
blindsided by.
You can see the stuff on the screen. There's tons of stuff to collect. Like there's lots of little merchants around that you can go talk to and get outfits and
That's
cool new
another.
pictos.
Actually, if we could just move back to the enemies for a sec, I feel like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
pretty important aspect of them that we kind of skipped over, because the fact that there are no random encounters just got mentioned. I do want to bring up, I am not a hater of random encounters. I do think they have their place, but they can also be annoying. And the benefit of not having them in this game, they did the right thing that you can only do when you don't have random encounters, and that is design every encounter that there is, like,
Yes.
like design them. So like how one of the impressive things about Chrono Trigger is that every interaction with enemies on the map is a designed thing, and so that you can have those moves, those combo attacks in Chrono Trigger that kind of move your characters across the play screen and kind of move enemies across the screen too,
Yeah.
because those encounters are designed specifically for you to think about those things, and they don't have to worry about random enemies not really fitting into whatever plan they had. Same
Yes.
thing goes for Expedition 33, and they really kind of make it feel like certain enemy combinations are like different puzzles that have to be solved, and so you
Oh yeah.
really
And there's a
really
rhythm to them.
can't.
Like you kind of learn the
Yes,
rhythm of these enemies
exactly.
as you fight them because, like Sekiro or like any of the Souls games with parrying, when you're parrying here, there's a rhythm. Like you learn the rhythm of the enemy and then you can deal with it as long as you remember that pattern. And generally speaking, they're pretty easy to remember or pretty visually clear. There's a few
Oh,
that
for
are less
sure.
visually clear that are certain encounters. But generally
Some of them
speaking,
go
it's
off of
pretty
like
easy to learn.
sound rather
Yeah, some
than
of them go off of
visual, which is
sound more
interesting.
so than
Sound.
the animation.
God, how fast or slow the screen zooms in too. That's another
Yeah,
spell that I've had to use.
But it's they all feel like different puzzles to solve, and what that means is that you never really, or at least I didn't really feel like I could just turn my brain off and like, okay, I'm gonna grind for a little bit, whatever. I'm just gonna press A because I have my
For sure.
menus set on memory. Like, no, you really have to kind of have like just enough of your brain on to feel like you're doing something. And like play differently depending on what the different enemy combinations are. And one last thing about them is that the tells for them that do exist, though there are some cheesy ones, I think are so much nicer than Sekiro, because Sekiro has, if there's the undodgeable attacks or thrust attacks or attacks you have to jump over, they all have the same red symbol, and okay, like that doesn't tell me what that move is going to be, but in Expedition 33 they do a really good job of differentiating, you know, how you need to react in the split second that you get to react.
Yes.
To where nothing really felt
If you don't
unfair.
see anything weird, your parry or your dodge is going to work fine. If you do see something weird, you've got two other options.
Yes,
Time to jump.
Yeah, your whole team jumps, so it's very fun.
Yeah, it's great. I think there's a lot of really fun encounters based on all this stuff. And again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can turn the difficulty down. You can turn it up if you're really good at it, because turns out when you can dodge every bit of damage that an enemy can put out, you can make the game pretty easy.
It's true.
There are enemies that will do things that affect you regardless of if you dodge or not. There's things like status effects that can get applied.
Get inverted.
Yeah, you can get all sorts of different status effects that will do things that are not pleasant. And actually, you mentioned inverted. I need to mention inverted because inverted is a cool status effect. It basically makes it so that any healing damages you, and it does that. So like your healing doesn't work anymore. However, there's a number of luminas you have that will do things like heal you a percentage of the damage you do. And the developers thought of this and were like, okay, if we allow that to be on the weapon, you will just kill yourself. And so they disable that part when you get inverted, so you don't just kill yourself.
Very nice.
Doing anything, which I know because I was doing a build that relied on that stuff. So I had like a fight where I got inverted. And I was like, oh no, if I do anything with this character, they will die. But thankfully they were nice enough to not have that affect it.
Yeah, I had like just baseline nice quality of life regen on everybody, your healing parry and healing dodge and things like that. I still, my favorite build is where you inflict self burn with one of the weapons, and the more stacks of burn I get, the more I heal from each hit, and the more damage I do. That's multiplicative.
The fun way to like ramp your damage for a long fight. But yeah, there's tons of depth to the combat system, tons of depth to the enemies, a huge variety of them. I think that's a really important thing to call out, is that like there's really a minimal amount of recolors, which is a pretty standard JRPG like difficulty indicator of enemies, is they'll get a recolored version of a thing. There's a small handful of those, but most of the time they're a new enemy with a new look and new patterns to learn.
Would you guys... How... I was trying to think of this in a way earlier where, like, would you describe there as being multiple different enemy factions? I don't feel like I would. It's more like the enemy types.
I don't think that's what they're going for. I think it's more that each area has a thematic set of enemies.
They're tied to the environment a little bit.
Which I think is fine. The game is like, it's not coy about the fact that the enemies want to kill you. Like there's not a generally speaking, you're not up against a morality challenge with a regular combat encounter. It's just you need to solve the problem. And yeah, the actual process of going from A to B here is pretty simple. The maps are relatively linear with a lot of offshoot paths for optional things to find things like lumina points.
Little hidden nooks and crannies.
Yeah, little hidden nooks. Which gets to my one other kind of complaint with the exploration. Some of the areas feel like they need a mini-map. Because there are certainly bits, one of the downsides of the visual style they chose, and I think in general the upsides far outweigh any downside, to be very clear. But there are significant portions of the game where if you get into a combat encounter in a hallway or something, and then you get out of that combat encounter, it's going to be really hard for you to remember which direction you were moving. without going to the end of the hall or
true.
back. Because it is generally the same layout. Like you're gonna see a lot of very similarly like rocky coral looks, or like this one manor kind of pattern that you'll see. Generally speaking, everything's gonna have that same like art style to it, and visual look, or that like French building look.
Which also is not indicative of a flawed level design. Annoying people on the internet, go put the fries in the bag, please. That's not what that means. I do think it gets a little easier to deal with over the course of the game once your brain gets used to the flavor of level design and environment that's in the game. But definitely towards the beginning, especially, I was really, really lost. For a couple of the dungeons.
A couple of the beginning spots are like that, and a couple of the optional in-game stuff is like that. There's a few that are like that intentionally. Like there's a cave you can go into that I'm sure was meant to be. Yeah, that cave for sure was meant to be a little bit confusing. In its layout, which is fine. But there's definitely other areas that I don't think were meant to be confusing. Like there's an optional in-game kind of like encounter thing you can do that has some special bosses that are like completely not story related, called the Crimson Forest. And it relies a lot on like verticality. So there's a lot of like levels here, but you have to like go hit 3 switches essentially in different areas.
The problem is if you fall, falling through
a
bridge at a specific point to find the last one.
But there's also like, because of how vertical it is, it's really easy to lose where you are because it's the same like 6 assets that make up that whole map. And that one in particular, it was like really weird trying to reorient myself because you just have no point of reference in that one. So I think it really becomes a case of like, most of the game does not need a mini-map, but there's a few specific areas that would really benefit from it.
I think early on I was getting really stuck in the Gestural Forest.
The Gestural Forest can be kind of confusing. So there's a lot of stuff like that. You have a full map screen in the overworld, and that's very useful to get around because it's pretty big. There's quite a bit of stuff and very pretty.
Very accurate too.
Yeah, it's very accurate. But it also has the thing of like in the overworld, when you're looking in a various area, you have monuments to kind of remind yourself of a direction. You've got the big monolith on one end, you've got Lumiere on the other, and can kind of like orient yourself that way. Where I usually didn't need the minimap until I was like clearing out optional side stuff to remember what I hadn't done. But yeah, I think most of the time it's totally fine, but there's a few things that get a little confusing with the mapping. The actual zones are all gorgeous. We'll go through like the Act 1 and prologue stuff a little bit here. So you have the city of Lumiere, which is very much like a kind of fantastical Paris that's living in this kind of doomed state because of the premise of the game.
Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, premise of the game. If you've made it to this point without knowing what that is, I'm impressed.
Yeah, really.
We finally get to talk about story. Yay!
Yeah, the gist of it. Okay. The gist of the story here is that there is a paintress painting numbers on a monolith. Each time that number is painted, everyone of that age dies. That's the setup.
Countdown.
And it's a countdown. It started at 100, and you're at 33 now at the start of the game.
They're looking pretty dire.
And you see what happens. It's like every time that number goes down, everyone of that age gets Thanos snapped, essentially, although it's very clear that it's a little bit more final than a Thanos snap. No one has ever come back from this, right? Like what's it called? The gommage. Yes, the gommage is what the game refers to it as. And so you have this whole doomed setup, and then the idea of the expeditions is, generally speaking, they are people of the age that is going to go away next year. So they have 1 year, and then they go and try to stop it, and try to kill the paintress. And that's the setup of the game. And in general, I think it's very effective. It tells you immediately what your goal is. And the game uses that as a huge thing. The monolith is a monolith that is visible from basically everywhere. So it's kind of your constant marker of progress. Too. Yes, it's your constant progress marker.
Like gradually getting closer the further you get in the story to the monolith. Oh, that was a fun touch.
Yeah. So there's a ton of push forward with that. It's a great like directive to keep going. It sets up a lot of your interesting things with your companions, where everyone is like, we have a year to live at the most, with the exception of Mael, who's interesting because she isn't 32. She is much younger, I think.
16?
I think, yeah, 16 is the right number.
Yeah, I think so.
If I'm doing the math correctly. Because she has 9 years left at 33, but it goes both ways. So yeah, she should be 16, I think. So she's much younger than the rest of the crew, and is just like, because of the fact the Gamage took her parents when she was very little, so she's lived as an orphan, being basically moved through foster homes over and over. So you have this whole setup of how
many orphans in Lumiere.
Yes, you have this whole setup of how she's been kind of moved about. The game does a phenomenal job of establishing these characters and the relationships that they have to each other. You're playing Gustav as your main character, and Gustav is fascinating because he's, I think, got a really interesting like perspective as a character for, especially a JRPG, where he's almost a bit more hopeful at the start than most, and he almost acts as a like combination father figure and brother figure for Mael, being that like they're very close friends, and she doesn't have a parent, right? And so the relationship is very interesting, and I think you end up, because of that, feeling a lot of Gustav's like protectiveness towards Mael, which is fascinating when it comes in play in the story, and you have a lot of moments that are like about that relationship.
They really weaponize it.
Yeah, they do.
They know exactly what to do at every turn with everybody's character motivation and all their their misunderstandings, their times for some characters to seem right and other characters to seem too angry or sad or confused to make rational decisions or whatever.
Yep.
It's all extremely well written, to the point where I've
it never feels like a character is stupid or making a stupid decision.
It doesn't. But it's one of those stories where, you know, the subject matter we've mentioned is you know, some of it is art and why you create and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of really like serious stuff that I don't know if we.
It's a lot of handling grief.
Just yet.
I think is the like.
Because the whole a lot of handling grief.
That's clear from the moment one of the prologue, right? Like the prologue's start is about Gustav confronting the grief and the reality that he's losing someone who he had a romantic relationship with at one point but hasn't spoken to in a while, because of a thing that like the setting of this world sets up such an interesting set of issues, because the reason they broke up initially is because Gustav wanted kids and she did not, knowing that they wouldn't live to see them grow up, right? And they would grow up and have a maximum age of like 16 before they're vanished into oblivion. So,
which even that speaks to Gustav's willing to hope for a better future, because he would have, if you know, with a better future possible, then of course you would want to have kids. But if you're, you know, if you don't think it's going to get better and you're so wrapped up in how it realistically is right now, which isn't a, you know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. No one is really right in this scenario.
Wow, topical.
It's like, okay, why would I want to bring somebody into a world that is just gonna, you know, not give them a chance at happiness? Why wouldn't you feel like a terrible person for bringing life into that situation? Which they get through that conversation in like under an hour before the game
literally
starts.
Like,
and it makes you
opening.
feel it makes you feel so much emotion for these characters you've been around for like 45 minutes, and just the music, the cinematography for the cutscene when everybody gets gommaged is like so impactful, where just like playing the beginning of the game, it's like you have to know you're getting into something good. You have to know you're getting into something good right then, because it's that kind of thing where that whole prologue segment happens and you're just like, wow, nothing else on the market is like this right now, and maybe nothing ever has been story wise, where like this specific setting is like so unique. And what I was saying before is that it is so like densely and realistically written that I'm almost concerned about some of the real writers and developers' life stories that they've had to deal with. Because my God, your heartstrings will not go untugged before the end of the game is over.
Yeah. And it's one of the really clever things about this game and the story it presents and the world it presents is, I think, the setting they've established here with the greater like Clair Obscur, whether or not there's another game or anything like that, it's a setting and a world and a writing style that I think a lot of people like to say games make a statement, right? I think that's often a very clear objective of games, is to make a statement on something. Like Last of Us Part 2 is about revenge and about the cycle of vengeance, and it makes a statement on that. I think a better way to look at it with Expedition 33 is that Expedition 33 is not making a statement on a thing, it's asking questions to the player about how they feel about what is being presented and how they handle all of these emotions that the characters are going through. And a lot of that echoing through the story, which we'll talk about when we get into spoilers. But I think to me that's the real genius of this game and why people have kept talking about it for so long. And why I think this is going to be like a generational title in terms of like how it's remembered, is because of the fact that it trusts its audience to be smart enough to come up with their own answers for these things and not make a judgment on what your opinion is, but instead present to you these various worldviews and philosophies and ask you to like sort through it yourself. And so the characters have their own opinions. Something that's very clear throughout the game is that these characters are really true to who they are, and that means there is conflict between them that sometimes gets solved and sometimes it doesn't, but it's very realistic, and at no point do you feel like the characters are betraying themselves or anything similar to that, because they're so well written and so well realized that everything tracks together. Yeah, I think that's about as much as we can say about the story without getting into spoilers. So I want to mention another thing before we get deeper in, which is the music.
Oh,
how can we not have talked about the music so far?
There are so many layers just talking about the music.
So we do like an end of the year thing where we have a couple of, or nearly in January, so we can talk about everything that came out in the year. We do a little awards show where we have different things. Normally, we try not to give one game multiple awards. Expedition 33, unless something really surprises me, is gonna be my game of the year, so I would try not to give it other things. The problem is the soundtrack of this game is so good that I cannot reasonably not give it that as well.
Yeah, that's
there's
dude.
Just
okay,
not competition.
The proof,
See, the proof that you
can see that this is a game that's going to be generational is that in the retro game stores that play the Street Fighter and the Final Fantasy soundtracks, they're already playing Clair Obscur music.
They're playing Clair Obscur music.
It hasn't even been a year yet, so it's it's already there. It's already generational.
This is now joining like my top two soundtracks of games, which is this and then Final Fantasy 14 with Masayoshi Soken's soundtrack for that. Because both, they run such a gamut of genres and so many different things, but they're so good at handling emotions and establishing how characters are feeling through the music, as well as just being fun. Like, there's a lot of moments in the soundtrack where it is reflecting really dark parts of the story and stuff like that, but there's also a lot of moments where it's just a good time.
Yeah, seriously.
One of the things for me was the second major area you go into is this kind of like underwater themed space with a bunch of coral, and you have like enemies that have little like I don't know what the mines are called, but the water like mines that you see submarines drop and stuff.
Depth charges.
Yeah, depth charges. Enemies that have that, and just this really cohesive underwater themed, and the music in that area was so good.
It's so good.
When you go to pick a flower and suddenly you're in a techno disco.
Yeah, in your disco fight.
It's great. It's so good.
Yeah, I think this is all the soundtrack stuff is absolutely phenomenal. There's even bits of it that we can't talk about yet because it gets into spoilers, bizarrely.
Yeah. I think there also might be close to the amount of battle, like basic random encounter battle tracks as there are main story areas.
Yes.
Which is insane because
there's
they're
8
all
hours of music for this game.
they're all good enough to be the battle track. Like you're used to like a Final Fantasy having like I don't know, like Final Fantasy IX has one for the first half of the game and one for the second half of the game for the basic battle music, and that's like, that type of track is something that can really define those games for a lot of people because they're pretty iconic because you hear them so often, but you don't have to worry about hearing any of them often because there's so many of them just for normal battles, let alone the different like specific story and boss battle tracks, and all of them are good. All of them are insanely good. It's
Yeah, and
I
speaking of
do
which,
not
like,
know how they did it.
there's really two of the biggest bosses in the game. I'm not going to mention anything else about them. They have each of them has a musical theme that is 11 minutes long.
Yeah. So
Mm.
some of them even have
Composed
lyrics.
Oh,
And
oh god, it's
it's the
it's so
combination of stuff like this.
good.
There's so much detail, so much put into this music, that it really is just like phenomenal. It's such a well realized thing. Uh, so yeah,
I've been trying to learn a bunch of the different songs on piano, and my god, it
Godspeed.
is.
yeah, and they run at such a
They do
variety
not
too.
sound
Where like
easy.
you have the techno stuff, you have the big important music is typically a paired piano and violin, with lyrics, and you get just tons of really interesting stuff out of this. Um,
And
okay,
you have someone playing a saxophone to the
Yep.
maximum extent a saxophone can ever be played.
Yep.
yes. I want to talk a little bit more about open world or the overworld before we get fully into spoilers, which is you have your little buddy they show off in trailers that can kind of fly you around in the very end game that they show off. But you start grounded. You start just moving around yourself, and you have to gradually unlock different modes of overworld travel, like a classic game. And I love that so much. That type of progression feels so well realized to me,
Yeah.
where it's like you just gain access to more areas as you go. From
You can
getting
see
things like just
teasers for
walking
places you
around.
can't quite go to
You see
yet.
things in the distance, and you're like, "Oh,
Oh,
that looks cool,"
oh,
but I
look at
can't
that!
get
Just
there
over that
yet.
hill.
There's a weird blue rock in the way, and I can't get past it. Tons of stuff like that, which is super cool. And just yeah, the variety of areas. You have gestural beaches, which are basically like mini game sections. Some of which are totally fine, and some of which are a nightmare to do. Uh, for example, the achievement for beating the game and getting to the final ending, I think, is at like 15% or so. The achievement for getting all the gestural beaches, which you can do far before that point, is at like 4%.
Yeah.
Oh my
Some
god!
It's
people, I think, will be
asinine.
locked out of the platinum for this game solely by the gestural
Because of that,
beaches.
yeah. I have all of them but one, and I do
There
not plan on going back.
Is it the
is
waterfall one?
is the one.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
I beat that one by pure luck.
I couldn't find a pattern. I was just trying. You're so slow, and I just had to try to spam it.
That's what I did, and it worked. So, you get lots of cool stuff through all those. One of them is basically like an only up or getting over it, like uphill climb that you have to keep jumping and doing parkour to move through, which is very cool and very frustrating. And yeah, lots of cool stuff like that. Tons of side stuff. You don't have like there aren't a lot of traditional like JRPG style towns, but there's some equivalency, and they're very cool. And there's lots of little things that you can do in there and side stuff. Um, and yeah, just lots of smaller things like that. And the scale of the world feels really appropriate for all the stuff that you do in it. They really establish a like feeling of size here, which is the big benefit of an overworld map, is that you don't need to make a full continent in terms of the space that you can travel through, but the overworld gives it the feeling of being a full continent. All right, that's overworld stuff. That's music. We've talked a fair bit about gameplay and the enemies. I think it's time that we get into the meat of the discussion, which is going to be spoilery talks. So, unless anyone has a final thing they want to throw in the non-spoiler discussion bit, aside from a, I think, resounding recommendation
Yeah,
God,
that's
please
what I
play
was
this
gonna
game.
say.
to
Yeah,
explain the
I
game.
think it's just like one of those ones where if you are the kind of person that like would be into it and you haven't already played it, I don't know like what your life has been like since it came out because you'd have no reason not to because it's like every single thing about it is really good. It's like I don't know, this is the closest thing that we're ever gonna get in terms of like the way the story is to Silent Hill 2 that we're ever gonna get in video games, maybe ever again. It explores things so interestingly. You're not gonna expect basically any of the things that happen. It's gonna have you by the balls the whole way through. You should go in knowing as little as possible, because I think some of the things being explained to you without context are gonna make whoever's explaining them to you sound like a psychopath because there's just some crazy shit that happens. And I don't know. This is people go, oh, they don't make them like this no more, but they really don't. They really
Yeah,
don't.
how's your thought web going for this, Ryan?
Oh my god,
Just
your Obsidian
Look.
thought web.
To give
Can
an
I
explanation
pick
for
a
that one, I use
thumbnail
a
as just a
note-taking program
zoomed
called
out?
Obsidian, which has like a thought web thing that you link things together. And Expedition 33, I have quite a few notes. It's a little concerning and maybe a problem. But we'll get into exactly why. But for now, that's going to be it for this one. That's the end of the non-spoiler discussion. I'm going to separate the video here so it's easy. If you're listening, you don't need to click off or anything. This is going to be the end of this video. The next thing is going to be the spoiler discussion. Don't click on that unless you want the spoiler discussion, because we're going to get into spoilers. And that's probably going to be split into two parts because of how much stuff we have to talk about.
Yeah.
So, fair warning, comes with a resounding recommendation. Check out Expedition 33. I think that's the resounding note of this one.
Yeah.